It's Mo. A little while ago, I started a Booker project, and I went through all the Booker books, looked at every year, looked at every short list, looked at every long list, saw what books I had read off of the Booker Prize, what books I had off of the Booker Prize, and I made a big long list. Oh, that's so interesting. So I had 12 books on my bookshelves, and I had read 12 books. Today, I thought I would delve a little further into this project. I've picked up or realized that a few more books on my shelves were from the Booker Prize, either on the long, short, or winning list. I think actually the ones that I have today are all on the short list. So let's go in order. The books that I picked up or had were Sour Sweet by Timothy Moe. This was on the 1982 list, and it has my name right there. I don't know if I like that or I don't like it. Next was The Underground Man by Mick Jackson. This is a really beat up copy. It's like really water damaged. This was on the 1997 shortlist. There was Bitter Fruit. I actually had this book by Ahmet Dangor. It's interesting because this book was published in 2001, but it doesn't appear on the Booker shortlist until 2004. Finally, I picked up Satin Island by Tom McCarthy. This appeared on the 2015 shortlist. I'm excited about all these books. I'm excited about adding them to my list. Some of these authors, Timothy Moe at least, were nominated more than once, but none of them won the prize. If I had 12 now, I have 16 books that I own that are Booker books. The other thing that I wanted to do was go through the Booker books that I had read and tier rank them into different categories. I've only done a couple of tier ranks, but I'll just go on Canva, make a little tier ranking screen, and tier rank that way. But before we get into the actual tier ranking, I wanted to go to Wikipedia and the Booker website to try to figure out what makes a Booker book, and it's like very vague. I thought they would have a strong mission statement or a strong description of like what makes a Booker book or why Booker books are chosen, but actually it's like a huge, wide criteria for what makes a Booker book, and it really comes down to the judges for that year. This is from the Booker website. It says, the Booker Prize is the leading literary award in the English-speaking world and has brought recognition, reward, and readership to outstanding fiction for over 5 decades. Each year, the prize is awarded to what is, in the opinion of the judges, the best sustained work of fiction written in English and published in the UK and Ireland. It is a prize that transforms the winner's career. And then it goes on to say what the prize amounts are and stuff like that. But that's it. That's all it says as far as like how to pick the Booker, or like what books are chosen for the Booker. Any books published in Ireland or the UK in, I think it's like a year from a certain date, so like from this time to this time each year. And then I think in May they pick the long list, in July they pick the short list, and then in November they're picking the winner. There is a video here. How long is this video? Let's see. It says how to win the Booker Prize. It's 4 minutes. Okay, that was informative. The video explained a little bit further that really it's publishers who send in a strict number of books that were published in the time that the Booker allows, and they choose the best books, and then the judges, led by a head judge, read all these submissions, all these books. They figure out a long list, and then they have to read them again and figure out a short list, and then they have to read that short list again and figure out the winner. So it's really what's published in that year, what the publishers decide to send in, what the judges like from those submissions. So that's not like a lot to go on, but I feel like there are certain books that are very Booker. And I think very Booker books deal with important topics usually depressing topics, usually depressing historic moments if they have a history in them. Like I am thinking of Milkmen by Anna Burns. Her book won the Booker, and everybody says that that's like a quintessential Booker book because it's got some difficult subject matter, but it is a captivating book. It also has a little bit of like a literary twist, and I think one of the things that I've heard the Booker admonished for is being too literary, that a genre book or a more simple language, simply written book couldn't win the Booker because the Booker lists tend to be like literary, snobbish a little bit. So that's interesting that people feel that way. One of the most Booker books that people have said like epitomizes the Booker is Michael Ondaatje's The English Patient, which I read and which is on my tier ranking list. If I'm thinking of like that and what I know about Milkmen as being like the top of like Booker, because The English Patient, although it was pretty simple, was definitely written out of timeline and had a little bit more nuance to the writing than just like a straightforward story. So if I'm going by all that to tier rank, here is my list and what I think of them. Now this is going to be like what I think of my favorite books and then also what I think a Booker book should be. First and foremost, let's do like what I think of the Booker books that I've read. So the first book on this list in no particular order is Little Eyes by Samantha Schweblin. I love this book. This book is about little toys that people buy, and there's two sides to this toy. You can have this toy in your house and it can wander around and be almost autonomous in your house, or you can buy a subscription to look through the eyes of this little toy, be an observer. So you can be an owner or an observer. I thought it was amazing. It definitely goes in the favorites category. The next book on this list is On Chisel Beach. I read this one earlier this year. This is the first book by Ian McEwan I read, and I read it because Bob's Booker read it for his Booker project, and he really liked it. Now, I didn't like it as much as Bob. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was okay, but again, this is just like my rating, so I would say it was worth it. It was an interesting book. On Chisel Beach is about a young couple going on their honeymoon. Through this one night on their honeymoon night, you kind of see all their flaws and all their worries and all their insecurities come to light, and it is about their relationship and how even though you're in love, even though you are ready to get married, you might not ready to be actually in someone else's life. Next, we have A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. I read this book a few years ago. It was a buddy read with Summer from Sterling Reads, and I really, really liked it. It's about a young man returning from World War I, and he is a painting restorer, so he goes to a church in a small town to restore part of the paintings there, and he meets like all the strange town folk, and he comes to realizations about his life, and he spends a month in the country. Next, we have My Sister the Serial Killer. Now, I really did like this one, but it's definitely not a favorite, so I'm going to put it in the yes category. And that one is about a young woman living in Lagos, Nigeria, and her sister is a serial killer. The Memory Police is next. I'm going to put that in the yes category as well. This one is about a small island somewhere in Japan that things are disappearing from, and when they disappear, your memories and your ideas and your knowledge of them disappears also. And it's about a main character who people around her don't feel the disappearances, and when that happens, the memory police get involved. Next, we have The Water Cure. I like this one. This is by Sophie McIntosh. It's about three sisters living in a remote island where their parents have sequestered them away, seemingly from some sort of plague or sickness that is happening on the mainland, and it is about their lives on this small island. Next, we have Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tatarchuk. I love this book. It's definitely going into my favorites. I thought this was fantastic. This book is about a older Polish woman living in a remote village where the majority of the people who live in the village are only there for the summer months, so she takes care of their houses in the winter months. There's only 2 or 3 other year-long residents there, and when one of those men mysteriously dies, our main character takes it on herself to to investigate his death. This is like borderline genre fiction. I would say the same thing about My Sister the Serial Killer, and actually I would say the same thing about The Memory Police as well. They're definitely very literary books. Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead is not a mystery, even though it has mysterious elements. My Sister the Serial Killer is not a thriller, although it has thrilling elements. The Memory Police definitely is sci-fi, but it's so literary sci-fi. Next, we have The Vegetarian. This I would put in yes. I did not like this book when I first read it. It's about a young woman who starts to have disturbing dreams, and from these dreams decide that she's not going to eat meat anymore. It's never told from her perspective. It's only told from other people's perspective in her life and what they think of her deciding not to eat meat, what they think of her lifestyle choices, and how that affects not only her, but everyone around her. The English Patient. I enjoyed The English Patient. I liked the movie more, so I am going to put this one in the worth it category. I think it was a good book. I think it was interesting. It was a little bit hard to follow because the timelines jumped around so much. I can see why people don't like this book. My friend Haley really didn't like this book, and I can see why people don't like it. I enjoyed it. I read it on audio, which I think made it flow really well. I would say it's definitely worth it to read, but not my favorite and not even like a book that I really, really enjoyed. Next, we have The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. This is the second Colson Whitehead that I attempted to read, but I DNF'd this book, so we're putting it in the no category. Now, that's not to say this was a bad book, or I might not have even liked this story. I only got a few pages in before I DNF'd it, because it is a no for me. It is too violent. There's too much rape and sexual assault in the first few pages, and I would not be reading this book. Now, when we go to the flip side and we talk about the objective, whether this should have been a Booker book, this is going to be in a different place. Martin Amis Times Arrow. I'm going to put this in the worth it category. This is the book that I've read the longest ago. I haven't read this book for 15, 20 years, so I can't exactly tell you everything it's about, although I do know it follows a man's life from birth to death, but there is a lot of playing around with the timeline here. This is a very alternative narrative kind of story, and I definitely think it's worth it. I remember loving it at the time, but I think it was the first book that really played with time in the narrative structure that I had ever really read. I think that it got points for me being young. I think if I went back and read it now, I would have a lot more issues with this book than I remember having. The last book of the 12 books that I've read off of the Booker Prize lists is The Amber Spyglass by Philip Pullman. This is the second in his Dark Materials series. It's a young adult book, not an adult book, and I'm definitely putting this in the category. I don't really understand why this was chosen for a prize. Why wasn't the first book chosen? I don't really remember this book well. This book I also read a long time ago. This might be the oldest book that I've read off of this list, or I read the longest amount of time ago. His Dark Materials follows Lyra, who lives in Oxford, England, and an alternative Oxford where her father is a adventurer and professor, and her mother is missing, and it's kind of Lyra's adventures trying to find her mother and trying to connect with her father. So that's my ranking. Definitely the most worth it's out of that, and some favorites, some yeses for sure. And then let's do a Booker books ranked that's Booker, for the Booker. Do I think this deserved to be on the Bookers? Let's do Booker Est, Booker E, Booker Ish, and then Booker, ? Non-Booker. Going in the same order, Little Eyes, because it is such a weird book, because it is not a linear story, because it is very much from lots of multiple different perspectives, I'm gonna say Booker? I'm surprised that this one was on the Booker list at all. That's weird to me. I don't know. On Chisel Beach, I definitely think is Booker E for sure. It's about relationships. It's not about bigger, larger, global topics like a lot of Booker books are, but it is about the inner workings of life. It has a lot to do with misogyny and gender roles. So I think it's definitely Booker E. A Month in the Country, I'm gonna put in Booker E as well. This one like borderlines on almost a country house mystery without the mystery. There's no mystery, but you do get to know like a lot about the townspeople. It has a little bit to do about the gossipy nature of small towns, that small town politics, but kind of seen from a lens of the time between the two world wars, of people coming back from World War I. So I definitely think it's got some of those like larger topics. And so I would say it's Booker E. My Sister the Serial Killer, I'm going to go ahead and put in Booker, ? Not because it's genre fiction, but because of the very straightforward way in which it's written, and because it doesn't push any boundaries necessarily. Yes, it does talk about morality and right and wrong, doing things that you know are wrong, but doing them anyway, and kind of in the guise of like self-defense or defending your peace as a person. I think it also does deal with like gender roles, and it also talks about men's obsession with women, but I don't think it's really very Booker. This isn't going the way I thought it was going to go. So next we have Memory Police. I'm going to put that in Booker ? As well. I can see that the larger themes that were not explicitly stated in this, the themes of homogeny and destroying individuality and destroying things that make people individuals, funneling people into one way of thinking until there's no humanity left in them. Maybe we'll put this in Booker-ish. We'll put this in Booker-ish because I think after talking about all those things, I can see how this could be Booker-ish. I also think that the narrative structure and the way that certain people are kind of unnamed, which is kind of a common theme. Little Eyes is similar, and when we get to Drive Your Plow in the Bones of the Dead, there's some similarities there as well. This could be Booker-ish, but I think the sci-fi elements and the book within the book element of The Memory Police is not very Bookery. The Water Cure, I'm going to put this in the same category. This is also almost like sci-fi dystopian, but I think there's a lot of commentary on gender roles, on individuality, and how you should protect that. I think there's larger topics like abuse and mental strain and stress that are put on people in certain situations that make this like Booker-ish. Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead, I'm going to put in Booker ? I love that book, like I said, and it is not a true mystery, but it is mystery enough that I don't know why it's a Booker book. Like, I don't know why it was nominated exactly. I think it's really interesting, and I do think there is like a lot of discussion of rights and how we treat each other as people and in society and as community. I think there's a lot of discussion about animal abuse and how if we treat animals like that, how could, and we're also treating humans like that. There's some crossover there. I think there's talk about people's individuality and their individual likes and wants seeming like crazy to a wider world, but like, is it a Booker book? I don't think so. These are hard. The Vegetarian, I think we're going to put in Booker E. I think there's discussion of bodily autonomy, mental autonomy, gender roles. I think there's a lot of discussion about familial relationships, which is something that comes up a lot in Booker books, which like none of these other books really had except The Water Cure and On Chisel Beach, I guess. I think that this one, because it's divided into 3 different perspectives, because it's told in a slightly non-linear manner, all those things make it Booker E. And then there's heavy topics, there's animal violence, there's misogyny, things like that. So I think that that is Booker E. The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje, we're going to put in Booker Est. I mean, it's definitely been called the most Booker book. It has to do with the Second World War. It has to do with people's roles in the war and how wartime and stressful times could make people do things that they don't want to be doing, they don't think they could possibly do. I think it has to do with familial relationships. It has to do with race and racism, othering people, again, lack of, in some ways, bodily autonomy, and things like that, and then also drug addiction, lots of other like heavy topics, and told in a semi-non-linear way. What's a good word for that? Like a more interesting narrative structure than just a straightforward narrative. Next, we have the Underground Railroad, which is, like I said, one that I didn't finish. So I really only got like 10, 15 pages into this book, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in Booker Est. I think that it deals with super heavy topics. It deals with familial relationships. It deals with racism and colonialism. It deals with slavery. And I think that there is jumping around in time to a certain extent in this book from what I've heard. Based on the one Colson Whitehead book that I've read, he's an amazing writer, so I'm sure his writing in this, especially because this is his most well-known and most well-revered book, is pretty phenomenal. Time's Arrow, I'm also going to put in Booker Est, because again, I think Martin Amis, although he's kind of fallen out of the zeitgeist, kind of fallen out of the literary world's relevance in some ways, was very relevant at this time, dealing with the Holocaust, dealing with the depictions of Jewish life and Jewish people in the world. I think the non-linear structure of this book, or non-usual linear structure of this book, definitely puts it in the Booker Est category. And then I'm going to put the Amber Spyglass in non-Booker. I just don't really understand why it's there. I mean, maybe I would need to go back and reread this series, but I think if you were going to put any book in the series, it would be the first one, just because it does deal with a lot of interesting topics and there are some layers of meaning in those books, but they should have put the first one, not the second one. So those are the 12 books that I've read for the Booker. Here is my personal ranking with my favorites and whether I think you should read them. Now, Amber Spyglass got a higher rating in my personal ratings because I did really enjoy those books. I just don't think they're Booker books. And then here is the ranking for whether I think these are like what I know of the Booker, how I've come to understand the Booker, if these are Booker books. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I read here. Let me know what you think makes a Booker book. Let me know what the best Booker book you've read is. And thanks so much for joining me today. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.